Hi, I'm Danny Duchamp. Welcome to my shitty Honda Fit. And I was in a hangout a week or two ago with, I don't remember who it was with. I think it was Sugar Tits and Charming Man was there, I think. I've done so many hangouts over the last few weeks that they've all kind of blurred together. I am addicted to them. But the point is that on that hangout, a YouTuber was mentioned. He is a feminist and a social justice warrior. His name is Garrett, and he is from New Zealand. Just like the country I am inside of. And since I never had the chance when we were doing the whole atheist thing on here on YouTube to call out Ray Comfort and apologise on behalf of New Zealand for him, I thought that I might take a look at Garrett's channel and see if I can't say a few words to him. Hey there, Garrett.
Hello.
Hello. So, Garrett, I understand you've had a YouTube celeb give you a bit of a shout out. Is that right? Well, I've had one of those too. Mine was from the mighty Bearing. Who's yours from?
I want to give a shout out to a very deserving YouTube channel.
Oh, no way. It's from Steve Shives. God damn. Okay, let's take a look.
And boy, is the phrase deserving YouTube channel applicable this time. The shout out this week goes to Garrett. He is an incredibly well-informed person on the subject.
Wow, this is a glowing recommendation.
Of what feminism
Baron,
is,
why wasn't mine this good?
Feminism is, of what feminists think and say, of feminist theory. Garrett is on the ball with all of that stuff. He is incredibly well-read.
Okay, it's getting a little
educated on the
fallacial now.
And it shows when you watch his videos. He is really sharp and just an absolute gem.
Seriously, Steve,
It's a really,
stop
really
sucking
excellent,
off.
Excellent YouTube channel. If you want a great example of someone who is an atheist and a socially conscious actor.
I'll take it back, Bearing. I liked my shout out better. Ugh. Oh well, let's just get back to the man himself. So, Garrett, how you doing? What do you want to talk about today?
In this video, I'm going to be reflecting on an incident that happened to me tonight and discussing my thoughts about a particular issue.
An incident and a particular issue. Glad you cleared that up for us, Garrett.
Okay, so here's what happened. I got invited out to have a drink with a friend of mine, and when I turned up, there was a guy there who I'd met once before and didn't much like because he made sexist remarks. And, said stuff that I just generally felt was distasteful, and I just didn't get along with him.
Yeah, we've all been there, I think. We don't always get along with the people we meet. I'm glad you put it like that, though, Garrett, that you just didn't get along with him. I was under the impression you were some kind of social justice warrior, and that if someone makes a joke that you find offensive or distasteful, you'd see that as unacceptable behaviour that we need to stamp out. But given that you describe him as just someone you didn't get along with, it seems you're actually being pretty mature about this. So, never mind. Then again, it does seem a bit weird to make a video entirely about someone you just didn't really get along with. So, something tells me that the mature response you're implying was not actually your response, was it? Let's continue just in case.
We were talking about an incident that I remember reading about a long time ago, I think it was in the late 90s, about Tarantino being in a nightclub or a bar one night and punching a woman in the face.
Ha! Good on him! Sounds like a good thing. I just wanted to make a positive remark about that.
And when I mentioned that Tarantino had supposedly hit this woman in the face, this guy said good on him, or sounds like a good thing, or something like that. He made a positive remark about it, which I found extremely distasteful.
Stop! You found it distasteful. That's fine. That's enough. That's as far as you need to go. You don't have a dark sense of humour, but don't turn a difference in taste into some kind of political or moral issue. Go on.
I found quite bizarre and misogynistic and just terrible thing to say.
Misogynistic, there's the magic word. Literally means hatred of women. Garrett, when this guy said something that was ostensibly in favour of punching this person, or when I did just before, do you think that it's a bit more likely that it was just a joke? Wait, What was this video titled again? Oh right, the just a joke defense. So, either you think that it's more likely that this person does hate all women and actually wanted one to be punched for no reason, in which case you're just divorced from reality. I mean, the entire reason that would be so shocking is because it's a position that fucking nobody has. Or you understand that it was definitely a joke, but still think that that means misogyny. If that's the case, then you need to learn what shock humor is. It only works if it is understood that the implied opinion is a bad one, an immoral one, a shocking one. If he was actually a misogynist who thought that women should be punched for no reason, then that kind of joke wouldn't even work.
But I moved on. I didn't respond to it, I just let it slide, because, I don't know, I just wanted to be pleasant and have a civil conversation.
Oh wow, someone made a joke that wasn't to your taste and you didn't actively try to make them feel like shit about it. How valiant of you.
Anyway, later on he starts having a go at me about something totally different, sort of a personal jab at me, who's, I'm someone he's met twice. I don't really know why he decided to take a jab at me, but anyway. I'm not going to mention exactly what he said because it gives away some personal details about me that I don't really want to give out, but needless to say, it was something that pissed me off.
So this guy has a combative sense of humor. What's wrong with that? Hell, I have that kind of sense of humor, tons of people do. You rip the piss out of your friends because it's fun to do. The more personal and the more brutal, the better. This guy was very likely just trying to be a friend. And again, you don't have to have the same kind of humor that he does, but if you don't understand that it is humor, you're autistic.
I also let that one slide and didn't say anything back.
Hero!
Then he said a third thing.
No, surely not a third thing. You know what? The epic ordeal of our brave hero Garrett requires some fitting theme music, I think. Fuck.
He was at this point being kind of confrontational to me. Everyone who was present at the time sort of felt that. There was quite a tense atmosphere. He said to me, "Do you like Brazilian pussy?" My response to that was, I don't like the word pussy. And then when he snickered at me after I said that, I responded to that by saying, I also don't like misogynists like you. Then he said, I don't like being called things I'm not. Well, it was at this point I brought up what he said when we were talking about Tarantino in that bar punching that woman. And his response to me bringing this up was to say, it was just a joke. And this is what I want to talk about with this video, the whole it was just a joke defense strategy that people use when someone calls them out on saying some shitty thing. Well, in my opinion, the it's just a joke defense is bullshit. I don't buy it for a second. I've never bought it. And in that conversation, what I said back to that was that I don't make jokes like that, and the other people present at that conversation didn't make jokes like that, because we don't have messed up attitudes towards women in our heads. I would never make a joke like that because it's just not in me to do that.
Garrett, so brave, he stood valiantly against some jokes that were not quite to his taste. If he hadn't stopped them then, they would have kept winning out of STEM. I mean, probably in some convoluted way.
And then I asked him if he would make jokes about Jews being pushed into ovens. And his response was, yeah, I probably would.
And Garrett, so strong. If only Germany had had him, 6 million Jews would not be gone. He'd have stopped those Nazi folks by whining about their jokes, like he's probably already whining about this song. You are, aren't you, Garrett? You're currently trying to figure out how this could somehow be, responsible for rape or something.
And he said something about, the fact that he's British and it's the British mentality, the British sensibility is to make that kind of thing, is to view that kind of thing as a joke and just make crass jokes and stuff like that. He has a bit of a point, but I responded to that by saying that the British comedy style, generally, from what I've observed, is to not punch down, is to punch up and to punch sideways, and to punch yourself is to use self-deprecating humor. They don't generally tend to punch down.
And they're inherently down, are they, Garrett? And so, by corollary, that would make men inherently up. Meaning it would be okay to make a joke about punching a man. But if situations were reversed and we instead lived in a world where violence against women was condemned by society and terribly taboo, whereas violence against men was not quite such a big deal, then it would be okay to make jokes about punching women. Okay. In such a world, your very next comment might imply, unironically, that it would not be too strange if your disagreement would have resulted in a physical altercation with this man.
My friend who invited me out to drink was getting kind of frustrated about the way the conversation was going, that it was getting quite hostile, it was getting extremely tense, and so I decided to drop it, because this kind of stuff makes me extremely irritated, and it could have escalated into something really bad, and I didn't really feel like, getting involved in something like that.
Were you implying that you might have punched someone over a joke? And would that have been punching up or punching down?
It reminded me of, in my last video, Stand Up for Women, one of the speakers said, don't tolerate rape jokes and sexist jokes and stuff. I don't know if she actually said sexist jokes, but she definitely said rape jokes. Specifically in the workplace, don't tolerate people saying shitty stuff in the workplace. And, we weren't in a workplace, obviously, we were having a drink at a bar, but I think the same sort of thing applies.
I think the fact that you can't tell the difference between a pub setting and a work setting kind of explains a lot. You really don't get people, do you, Garrett?
And I was thinking about it when I was on my way home after I left. And I was thinking that, people who make those kinds of jokes, in my experience, that their views are quite deeply entrenched, and they generally can't really be reasoned out of having those kinds of views, those sexist kind of views. The viewing women as objects thing, which saying, do you like Brazilian pussy? That's obviously viewing women as objects to some degree, to be able to frame a question like that, which I would just never do. To frame women as a means to sex, and that's it.
Do you like Japanese food? Oh, sorry. That's portraying Japanese people as just a means to food. Just because we talk about someone providing food or providing pussy doesn't mean we just think of them that way.
Obviously, he doesn't just think of them that way, but he framed that question that way. It's not the same to say, do you like Brazilian pussy, as to say, do you like having sex with Brazilian women? That's not the same. I mean, I guess you could say that the intent may have been the same, but it doesn't come across the same way.
So you just said that after hearing him say what he said, that it was obvious to you that he doesn't just think of women in that way. And you just said that what he said came across as though he does just think of women in that way. If you don't see the contradiction here, frankly, you're beyond help. So how about you go ahead and tell us how you plan to use passive-aggressive disapproval to socially engineer away all jokes and opinions you don't like, without ever having to have an honest dialogue about it, and I'll just sarcastically play some more dramatic music behind it,
Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that calling out rape jokes and sexist jokes and stuff is important, especially in the workplace and just in social scenarios in general, social situations, because it's important to let people know that that stuff's not okay. You're probably not going to change people's views, but you can change the social dynamic, change the way people talk, change the things that are considered acceptable one step at a time.
Garrett's so brave, he is gonna use up all the fucks I previously gave.
Now, I don't know if my calling out what he said is going to have that effect. Probably isn't. I'm not the kind of person who people in my social group tend to look up to as some sort of, figure to be influenced by, or to, people don't generally care about my opinions that much in my circle of friends.
Well, this got fucking sad.
But, it did change the atmosphere at the gathering, and it made me feel extremely uncomfortable. More uncomfortable, I think, than I would have felt if I hadn't called him out on it. I don't know, it's hard to say. And, I think I pissed my friend off by bringing it up. It didn't lead to anything good, anyway. So, it made me think about both how bullshit the "it was just a joke" defense is, and, the whole question of, how to deal with people saying shitty things in social situations like that. How do you deal with it?
Okay, that actually sounded like an honest question, so I'll give you an honest answer. The first thing you should do is be open-minded to the idea that perhaps other people's preferred method of interacting with one another is actually valid. Some people prefer a more combative, joking kind of humour, or even dark humour. It's often the same people who have been through some really dark shit who like dark humour. Not always, but a common coping mechanism for dealing with shitty things that have happened to you is develop a sense of dark humour about that thing. That isn't to say that everyone who has a dark sense of humour has been through something dark, but it's good for people who have, for there to be an accepted form of humour in society that allows them to move on from these experiences. Now, this may not be your preferred mechanism of coping, if you've been through some dark shit yourself anyway. But people are different. That's a good thing, I would have thought. And this is just one example of a way in which someone else's method of interaction may seem foreign to you, but it may in fact be totally valid if you understand it. It's also worth noting that you won't always understand, but try to err on the side of letting people be different from you. Unless there is a clear, unambiguous malice in how they're acting, just let them do them and let you do you. That's the first piece of advice, by the way. That whole thing was just the first thing. The second piece of advice I have is that if the rest of the group you're with is not digging this sense of dark humour that someone has, then, well, that can be awkward, true. But I'd try hinting at them to maybe tone it down a bit or not quite be so dark. Or I would tell them to shut the fuck up because their jokes aren't funny. It depends on the reading of the situation in that particular instance. What you don't do, though, is insist that it's all because he's secretly a misogynist. You don't know that. And it's a pretty hefty allegation to make on such weak evidence, because, well, you're about to tell us why.
Another thing I wanted to touch on was his assertion that he's not a misogynist. As I've mentioned in other videos on my channel, almost no one with misogynistic views is happy with the label misogynist. It's like racists. Most of them don't accept the term racist. They don't want to be called racist. They don't want to be known to be racists. And this is because, racism and misogyny are not acceptable in our culture. This is a sort of widespread understanding that these views are harmful and negative. And if you label yourself with the term misogynist and racist, people are going to have a negative view of you, and your views are going to be self-marginalized.
Yes, that's why. So don't bandy about that accusation quite so frivolously, okay?
And generally, people understand this, so they won't go for that. They'll reject the label of misogynist or racist. So to me, him saying he's not a misogynist is utterly meaningless. It doesn't mean anything that he would say he's not that. It's not up to him. It's up to the people around him to judge what he says and does. We can't see inside his mind like he can, but he's not likely to be honest about that if he is a misogynist.
Garrett, so brave, he will proudly lead the odds against you if you misbehave. Though they cannot read your mind, they will still somehow decide whether you are secretly full of hate.
So, from my point of view, the best judge of that is other people. And the other side of this is that people with misogynistic views, just like with racist views, they feel that their views are acceptable. They feel that their opinions on these issues are fine, and because they justify it to themselves by whatever means. So they'll say things like, oh, this particular thing I said isn't misogynistic, because to them, maybe it isn't.
Yeah. For example, they might say that their bigotry doesn't count because the other person is privileged and it wouldn't be punching down, so it's okay. Well, okay, that's all I'm going to do on this video. I cut out a bit here and there, so if you think I might have been unfair on Garrett, feel free to watch the whole thing in the description. Yeah. This one kind of petered out, didn't it? Well, get out of my shitty Honda Fit.